want answers.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
All right. Welcome to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton. CRNtalk.com, truth-radio.com. Playoffs are started. Another big distraction. A lot of crazy weather all across the U.S. We got a big guest today that I mentioned last week. We were supposed to have him last week. Daniel Mercuri, running for California governor. 2026, got a new book coming out. We're going to bring him on as soon as we start our next segment. But leading up to that, I want to go through just a couple of this week's headlines, just so that we're on the same page as like where we are in the world and just the chaos, the controlled chaos. And it's everywhere. It's global. And before I do that, I want to mention something else, a little quick plug. Truthfortheday.com on my New Year's resolution, truthfortheday.com. Posting one truth, one biblical truth, relating a world event, something going on in the news, and bringing scripture into it, just trying to give a perspective on it. So check that out. You can also check it out on Truth Radio 33, Instagram, Facebook, and a new YouTube page. So now these shows are also going to be up on YouTube. We're going to try to keep them up there. Anything that looks like it might be flagged, maybe we'll do a little short video to push people to our Rumble page, but that's still a work in progress. Who knows? We could hear the trumpets any day now for all we know. But let me just go through a couple quick headlines. As this country is being just infiltrated ad nauseum, something I've talked about all week, about over 250,000 illegal immigrants every month for the past few months. It's been hundreds of thousands a month, but it's getting to an astronomical number now. And we're talking about thousands of terrorists on the most wanted terrorist list. Hamas, Hezbollah. And you got Hamas leaders wanting to build on their October 7th attack in Israel. And what does that mean for us here in this country? We've got China insurgents. They're migrating here too. They're setting up police stations. They're buying up land. You got government workers warning of a potential terror attack from Hezbollah. FBI Director Christopher Wray. Again, all of these signs, they're telling us what to expect. They're conditioning us, but most people are so distracted. We got the playoffs. We got pick your streaming platform to keep us distracted, to keep us entertained, all the while rewiring our brains to accept things that are anti-Christ in nature, because that is the prevailing spirit of this world, but most people are spiritually blind. And then we're worried about our children. We got Republicans warning of a proposed law by HHS forcing foster families to accept radical gender theory, pushing all of this on children who should not be making decisions like that. We talk about that all week on the JD Report. We got a Seattle teacher that says calling yourself straight is offensive. This is the world we live in. This is the upside down world we live in. Of course, we got Dr. Fauci claiming he did not recall the origins of COVID. Got students at a Brooklyn high school being forced to take online classes to make room in their actual high school for these immigrants who are dehoused from the tents due to the bad weather. Another thing, University of Michigan increases number of DEI positions to over 500. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Forget about merit, integrity, character. It's just about what minority group do you fall into so we can hide our evil deeds behind that mask. Something I'm sure we'll get into talking to Daniel when we come back. We got a leftist pastor, Jim Wallace. I mean, so many progressive pastors proposing themselves as leaders of the flock and representing Christianity today, but he's saying anybody who follows Trump and all of his constituents are evil. Well, I'm not a Trump backer. I think he's part of the big world stage. Labeling anybody who follows someone else in a world of deception evil is plain evil. It's a lot of gaslighting. It's a lot of projection going on. We got the Jeffrey Epstein documents supposedly being released. We don't see any justice. We got a lot more. But we're going to have Daniel Mercuri when we come back. His new book, Lucifer Zenith, is something that you do not want to miss. Stick around on Truth Radio. Be right back. All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com. Truth Radio trying to unpack the cultural baggage one truth at a time, expose one lie at a time. And as I mentioned, our guest, 1 week in the making, I think this is like fourth or fifth time on at least, big friend of the show, brother in Christ. He's got a new book out that just exposes everything that he's, all of this accumulated wisdom and knowledge through his time running for a Congress seat in his local district, and all the way up to his run in the special election, the recall election, and now running for governor for the second time leading up to 2026. Just uncovering all this corruption. Is Daniel Mercuri. He's a U.S. Naval veteran, former HS-4 Black Knight. He performed his duties as an aircrew search and rescue combat search and rescue during Operation Southern Watch, Enduring Freedom, and Iraqi Freedom. He's dedicated his life to serving this country, was honorably discharged in 2003, and he hasn't stopped. He works a full-time job plus hours, raising 3 kids, and one that's just a handful right now that we keep in prayers, a wife who's on the front lines in a hospital, and he just continues to push the truth as much as he can to anybody that will listen, and a lot more people are listening. Daniel Mercuri, how are you, brother?
I am doing great, especially all things considered. Tough times, getting tougher by the day, both, personally and, of course, politically with everything going on in our state, with our country. I thought briefly that, I should take a step back, after running for Congress, the recall, the 2022 prime. And, a part of me sat back, and it was funny is that right at the end of 2022, when I didn't make the primary, I got phone calls right away from people all over the state that were like, how could this be? We didn't vote for these people. I don't understand. Can you come talk to us? Can you break some of this down? And I thought, why not? Of course. Yeah, people want answers. And it was literally the day of the election of 2022. I was speaking to a Los Angeles Patriot group that was just fed up, and they just didn't understand everything. And so I haven't stopped since November of 2022, made my declaration for the 2026.
Well, I remember, I guess it's been over 2 years now since that summer. It wasn't really a debate. It was, you had a lot of the conservative speakers.
Yes.
And it's just mind blowing, the presentation that you told me before we came on, that your presentation, which was already mind blowing then, and you get all this information, you're like, wow, what do I do with this? And you've actually expanded on that to the point where you actually wrote a whole book because people kept clamoring for this truth. But one of the things in your introduction to the Lucifer Zenith, which is just an amazing title, and we'll get some graphic up there too, is, and I highlighted quite a few things, but you wrote, if they, the voters, only knew just how infiltrated each of those groups have become, talking about, the DNC, the GOP, everything, every voter might just become their own agents of truth and would easily identify candidates with moral decree instead of concubine lip service. That's when you go on to say that, we just become automatons over actual critical thinking and doing our own due diligence. And I feel like that sums everything up so perfectly. So kind of sum up, I guess, since that last election ended to where you are now, just and then we'll get into the book, and because I honestly don't know how you've handled everything you're going with in your family. I don't know if you want to get into that, just to give people a brief outline of what you're dealing with, and yet you're still willing to go to fight for the people who don't know they need a voice like you representing them.
So, I after the 2022, I really had to kind of take a bit of a step back. I had to take a breather. In fact, half of the websites are, my YouTube page, Facebook, a lot of things we suddenly got blocked right at the day. And I really just wanted to throw my hands up. I didn't want to refight for my profile. A lot of my videos just got tanked, and nobody knows that. And so my wife and I would just start taking everything down, and I was rebuilding them all back up from scratch. But then I thought, well, what am I going to do with this? I mean, really, I got maybe 2% of the vote, give or take. The numbers that were shown on some of the websites weren't accurate. I had to call county by county to get the number. So it was about almost 3%. And I thought, I can't just let the information go by the wayside. I can't just take all this information and do nothing with it. I've got to continue to fight the good fight, because that's what the Bible tells us to do. If we're Christ believers, then we are called to be watchmen on the wall. We have to sound the alarm. Otherwise, the blood isn't on our hands. And I really do take that personal. But as the time went on, the following year, a couple of months, my daughter was born. And my second daughter, third child, was born at the end of November. And my firstborn daughter was diagnosed with leukemia in May. We were already noticing some signs a little bit before then, but it was towards the end, after she did a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament. She trained really hard for it. They thought that maybe she was just fighting an infection, but then because all her blood markers were coming up, so they thought it was just an infection. And then right after the tournament, when she got second place, she battled it out with all these other beautiful little girls. She just suddenly things started to wane. And that put a tremendous amount of pressure, where I was just going to throw my hands up and say, I'm done with all of this. I got to focus on my children, my child. And then the longer I prayed, the more I focused, and I started asking people for prayer. I started realizing that this attack didn't come from God. Of course not. It comes from all things evil. Lucifer, Satan, sons of disobedience, they all want to attack those of us who are Christ believers, who are firm in our faith. They want to shake us, spiritually, physically, mentally. They want to weigh you down, wearing out the saints. And I thought, if I throw in the hat now, if I throw in the towel now, I'm giving up. And I'm giving up on a future that my children are rightfully owed. And so I took that time and I said, no, I'm going to step up, and I'm going to continue to fight. And, I'll sleep when I'm dead, and through all the prayers, my amazing daughter has become my new hero. She has truly fought through the ups and downs. She's not out of the woods yet, but she is responding really well. And all the doctors have a tremendous amount of high hope. And it literally has been prayers. And it is her that has given me extra courage and strength to take this information and really put it out there and not give up. And it was my wife who said, why don't you put it in a book? And so that's exactly what I did. I put it in a book, and it'll be coming out at the end of this month. It'll be available online. Right now we're going to go through Amazon. We are seeking some other publications, but for now, we thought no more wasting time. Let's get it out there.
The book you're talking about, if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, Lucifer Zenith, Corrupting Nature's God Through Government Deception, Daniel R. Mercuri. Why don't you take us through this cover art right here, briefly, since some people are listening only on audio, but it's a pretty cool picture.
Thank you. It took about a month to put it all together, but with the help of my amazing wife. It's just, the Capitol that is in flames, engulfed in, bright flames and fire. And to the far right, you can kind of see a little face, a sinister, evil face in the flames. And the writing is in the middle, where you can kind of see a little bit through the background. And down below are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. A lot of people wanted to know, what this book is about. And so it's a summary of everything that I have learned and figured out. Why all the pervasiveness? Why are all these elected officials getting away with what they're doing? How is it that they're getting away with it? How does this tie into the Bible and biblical prophecy? And then I end with, what is it that we can do in hopes to try to fight back? And I also provide, I've had 4 prophetic dreams, but I provide one of the most intimate ones in this book as to how it pertains to California. It was something that I'd never happened to me before. And when I woke up, I told my wife about it. I've had 4 of them. And my wife looked at me with this surprised face, and she said, I think I can interpret that. And I said, can I tell you what I think first, and then you share it with me? She says, yeah, of course, let's do this. So we sat down, and she started breaking it down even greater than I could. I could only tell her what I was, seeing, what I thought it meant, but her analogy and her understanding, and she was shocked because she was like, I never do this. She was just looking at me going, and she turned white and she said, I think I can do this. I think I know what it means. And that also too is very biblical. So I put that in the book. And there really is, I tie everything into how it all works together. and explain. I try to summarize to get people to a point where those who are waking up now don't really know where to start. And that's what this book does. It helps you I filter all the mess and I put it in here as to where corrupt government operates, what they focus on, because this is what I figured out operating behind the scenes. When you run as a gubernatorial candidate, you are privy to a lot of information that the average person would not get.
Right.
You know,
I think what might be a cool idea is if we go through, because basically your presentation, which is what I mentioned earlier, that's now doubled, tripled in size, it sounds like, and it was already a mouthful. I mean, you're probably talking about a 3-hour presentation now with slides. And we have those slides. We can get them up on the screen, and then for those listening on audio, we can just have you kind of go through, and we can forward through some of the ones that aren't as important. But basically, the book is a compilation of all of that, and then some.
Yeah, the slides that I provided are a section of the book that deals with one of the areas of how do we fight back, and it also helps to explain why your representatives who have turned their backs on their constituents, why they're getting away with it. It explains why you don't see any investigations into your representatives who pass egregious legislation. You will notice that there are specific words that allow for them to not be indicted or held accountable. And so that's what some of these slides that I presented to you that sort of outline that are in the book, broken down a little bit more in detail. But this section focuses predominantly on the oath. And I just recently gave this out to, I just did this presentation with a patriot group in Fountain Valley. And, I was asked, Daniel, we've got a lot of patriots out there that want to get into this, but they don't really know much. They don't know really where to focus on. So I had a super PAC, Patriots for Freedom, asked me to come out and do the presentation. And so that's exactly what I did. And I put this together. That was a portion of the book.
We got a little bit of time left in this survey. Let me come back to a shot of us. Tell me a little bit about, and we'll probably have to bridge this on the next segment, about the pushback you've gotten. You were even invited to speak somewhere, and then all of a sudden some people were getting their ears ruffled and they didn't like it, and they wanted you to stop. Yeah. And that kind of resistance, you know where that comes from, the enemy. But tell us about that and what that's been like dealing with that kind of stuff.
Oddly enough, and I'm okay with saying it out loud. I was invited by the Riverside GOP. There are roughly 3 caucuses, and one of the caucuses loved my presentation. They asked me to come back and speak to all 3 caucuses. And when I did that, the chairman of the 3 caucuses and people that were in the crowd wanted me to stop. And so they asked me in the middle of my presentation, "Stop, Daniel, you need to stop talking."
It's unreal. People, you hear it in the top of the show, you can't handle the truth. People cannot handle the truth. They want it, but they want something that fits into their narrative of the world that's just been so manipulated their entire lives. So hopefully any of those 3 people have come to realize after that truth bomb set in. Sometimes it takes a little bit. We'll get back to that on the other side of this break. Stick around, everybody. We're talking to Daniel Mercuri, running for California Governor 2026, author of the Lucifer Zenith. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, CRNtalk.com. truth-radio.com, truthfortheday.com, spell out the 4. I'm go back to our little 2-shot here, talking to Daniel Mercuri. We could go through some of those slides and like pick and choose what topics you want, unless there's anything else you want to like start with. This is a short segment here. It's only 6 minutes.
I mean, we can bounce back to, you had brought, I had brought up the GOP. My first, indication to your listeners is not everybody in the GOP is, out there trying to, disrupt candidates or anything like that. There are a number of them that are trying to clean house. There's a number of them trying to set things straight. But where the ignorance stems from is from people not knowing their own state constitution, the Constitution. They want to get behind a candidate, but the problem with that is that how do you address a new candidate with redress and grievances when you really don't have any idea if your current representative is engaging in egregious behavior because you just don't know the laws. You don't know what they can and cannot do. So how do you know what to ask if you don't know what to ask?
Right. Well, that's one of the things I loved in your foreword, in the introduction to your book. You talk about that, and you talk about how a lot of the other candidates running talk about wanting to work with the candidates that are already getting us into this state of corruption and crime that we're in. And you just talk about them in this way. You say, why negotiate? Negotiating new and egregious legislative Senate bills or assembly bills with a criminal makes you a criminal. Domestic enemies are still enemies, whether they've been voted into office legally or they are a foreign nation attacking the United States from distant shores. Their desired outcome for the fall of our nation and the continued enslavement of our people is the same. I have no desire to bring any domestic enemy to the table. There is no table. They destroyed it with their deceit. And we know what the Lord feels about deceit. I talk about it ad nauseum. This world is nothing but a state of deception.
Yes.
And the purest form is to rip apart the truth and weave it into the lie. And that's what they're really good at doing, using the truth to tell lies.
Yeah.
And that's what I love. You say, I'm going to put people in jail. And every time I hear you stand up for that, I'm like, yeah. And you say it's not like taking on Goliath. It's like taking off Goliath and his 4 brothers because it is. People don't realize how deep the main the deep state goes. And I had a guy, Chad Copy, running for Senate in Kentucky. He's in his late 80s and he's running for it because he just sees the corruption. And he was a pilot for many years. He was in the Army, very decorated career, and he's seen through, and he was just going through all the different layers of deception. And I do feel like there has to be a hand of God protecting you and anyone else speaking out against this stuff, because you see, you can't watch any. I brought up streaming television, and I don't want to encourage people to get into that. I love watching it, a lot of these shows sometimes, because it's just truth in plain sight. But it comes to a point where I was like, I can't keep investing time in this. They keep showing us the same kind of government deception and corruption in every single show, and people just think it's entertainment. Yeah. And we're being so conditioned not to believe that stuff exists, or not to believe it could ever be that sinister. Yeah. But it really is that evil, and it's the spiritual blindness. So I don't know if you got any comments on that.
No. I mean, it actually kind of piggyback off of what happened. That spiritual blindness was interesting when I was in the rooms talking to the Riverside GOP. It was like everything started going wrong. The microphone kept going in and out. They weren't prepared for me to come there. We had stipulated to make sure they had a back, projector. I could connect my computer, but I always bring my own equipment just in case. And I happen to reel it in. Some people didn't even realize that I was coming to speak. Like, everything was like dismantled. It was discombobulated. The left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. But as I began to speak, they had just all sworn an oath to support and defend, protect the United States Constitution and the state constitution as well. And one of my first things I said was, all of you who just, rose your hand to support, I said, did any of you actually ever read the California state constitution? And they shook their heads no. And I asked them, I said, well, then why did you just raise to support and defend a document that you've never even read? For all you know, you can be in complete disagreement. And 2 of them got up and walked out right in front of me because they were offended by that.
Right.
And I said, truth hurts. It really does, right? But the hard truth is what we really need, and that's where spiritual conviction comes in.
It is. And you know what? A lot of times those hard-headed people, it's like they get up and walk out, but then you know it's marinated in their mind. And you know darn well they went and read the Constitution. They went and read the state constitution. So it's like those that are willing to take those fiery darts from people in their anger because they've been so conditioned to believe stuff that's nonsense. It takes somebody like you to step up and make them think. That's what we got to do, make people think. All right, stick around, guys. We got plenty more to talk about here with Daniel Mercuri. You're listening to Truth Radio, truth-radio.com. And check out the book, The Lucifer Zenith. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton along with Daniel Mercuri. DanielForCalGovernor.com. I'm assuming that's still a good URL.
Yes, it's still, it hasn't changed. DanielForCalGovernor.com.
Excellent. 2026. And, regardless of where you are politically, you want truth. Everybody wants truth. They say they want truth, and we're talking about how hard it really is for people to handle the truth when they're not used to it. We're so coddled. We've been coddled our entire existence in this world to believe things that just aren't true. They serve the rulers of this world. If you're looking at things globally from a more godlike perspective in different ways, you realize it always takes me back to my favorite C.S. Lewis quote regarding Christianity. I believe in Christianity as I believe the sun has risen, not because I see it, but because through it I see everything else. When you ingratiate your mind and when you transform your mind, when you renew your thoughts by being in the Word, you start to see things in the world for what they are, not for what they're told they are. Two very different things. And I'm going to read a quote here as I bring on the slides of Daniel and his presentation that he's put into an amazing book. I'll put it up on the screen so if you're watching, you can read it. If an oath is a promise binding under the laws of nature's God, then it is a solemn statement of fact and truth. It cannot be diluted or adulterated. Such a deed would be an act of villainy under his law. Here to offend you. All right, where are we at with this? So you actually broke down your 3-hour presentation into 20 minutes?
No, I broke down a segment of just the oath portion that's in the book. It's
gotcha.
Towards the end. And it was the one thing that I had been focusing on with a team of people, actually, that we were pulling oaths all up and down the state of California. And I realized there's something wrong with the oath of office that's inside the California state constitution. And it took me about 6 months with some of these amazing patriots that are up north, down south. I mean, I have people working with me. And I just said, let's start pulling oaths. We need to start making comparisons, and we need to see what's going on. And we need to start researching the history of the oath. And so this is the rabbit hole I went down. And so what I discovered was in the next slide was that California state constitution, it was enacted in 1849, but I thought it was odd that there was no oath. It didn't exist. They never put it in there. And that wouldn't be surprising because it was just being established. Government was just starting to grow. And so, but it was quickly changed in the next slide in 1879. So they didn't wait too long to finally establish and institute an oath. And it lasted till 1951, literally lasted for 2 years. And when you go to the next slide, you'll see that it's very basic. It's good fidelity. But there's a word in there that's very ambiguous. And that is that down on the bottom, it says that they will faithfully discharge the duties of their office according to the best of my ability. But that's ambiguous. Your ability, the best, well, there's no definition as to, well, what is the best of your ability, really? There's nothing in there that can hold you truly accountable. And in the state of California, I went all the way back to 1988, and I found all the people in the state of California that were convicted of a crime, that were elected officials, whether they were judges, sheriffs, assembly, you name it. And what's interesting to note is that none of them ever went to jail for violating their oath. It was only a criminal act of causing injury. In other words, a court maxim is for every crime, there must be an injured party. For every injured party, there must be a remedy that can only be decided by the people in the trial jury, by an impartial jury. So these individuals went to jail for like embezzlement, murder, rape, something like that, kidnapping. So I have a list of that. I haven't put it out on my website, but I will, so that people can see. But why weren't they indicted for violation of their oath? Because they also had engaged in egregious activities. What happened? So that led me down. Ability. Yeah, exactly. So then the next slide shows that in California State Constitution 1953, Proposition 6 came out. And it was voted into law by the people. When the people speak, it's final, right? When it gets put into the state constitution is the highest official law of the land of the state. It's the highest that you can go. So all codes, mandates, regulations, policies, and ordinances, those all have to align with the state constitution. There can't be a separation between the two. There can be no difference. They can't be at odds with each other. They got to be uniform. And so it was in 1953 that they amended the oath. And it was actually one of the harshest of all the oaths at that time if you compare it to other states. They were similar at the time because of what was happening. But if you go down to the next slide, you'll see that it went from one paragraph to two paragraphs. And the first paragraph, again, is just chock full of good fidelity. There's really nothing binding in there. But there is another word in there that was also in the original that I'm going to discuss at the end. But basically, this one is good fidelity, and it says that without any mental reservations or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Well, again, what is well and faithfully, right? There's nothing in there that describes, well, what is that outline, right?
Right.
So what I decide, what I deem to be right, you may not, or what I deem to be well and faithfully, you may not. So again, it's ambiguous, allows for a broad spectrum of inactions or lack thereof, right?
Right.
So that took me to the next slide. If you go to the second paragraph, this is a very beautiful paragraph. This second paragraph, this is the nail in the coffin that made sure that your representatives would not engage in, key words here are in otherwise, other unlawful means. I'll only read the first sentence, but it's about past, present, and future of that, and I do further swear or affirm that I do not advocate, nor am I a member of any party, organization, political, or otherwise, that now advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States or the state of California by force or violence or other unlawful means. Those are key. Now, if you keep reading it, it repeats that, but it repeats it as present, past, and future. They want to make sure you didn't do anything in the past, you're not going to do anything in the future, and you're not doing anything now that you're engaging in an otherwise, other unlawful mean. Key. Big umbrella words that was like, okay, you're going to be my representative, but you can't engage in an otherwise, you cannot be part of an otherwise group that I can't name, and you cannot engage in an overthrow in any way, shape, or form of an otherwise other unlawful means. So maybe you didn't do it by violence, maybe you're not doing it by, force, but maybe you're doing something that is an otherwise, right, other unlawful mean.
Right.
What does an other unlawful mean? That's the catch umbrella of, oh, I don't know, anything I can't think of. You don't get to do it that subverts the people's rights and undermines the supreme law of the land. Beautifully written. Mm-hmm. So if you go to the next slide.
Ignorance loves ambiguity.
Very much. And the law doesn't, the courts don't allow for ambiguity. In fact, a court maxim again is wherever there is ambiguity, certainty must prevail. They want certainty, right?
We know Satan is the master of confusion. That's his number one tool. Confounds
everything. Mm-hmm. That's why it says in the book of Daniel that he will think to change the times and the laws. And that was a verse that sent me down this rabbit hole.
Oh, wow.
Right? So those are the three ones. So if you go, it says otherwise, other unlawful means. That's the umbrella phrases that they put in there. So if you go to the next slide, Why did they change it? That was because in 1950, there was the Red Scare. These people at the time, our people, American people, were afraid of communists that were going to be potentially infiltrating our government, right? And I'll read the second paragraph there, but it says that it was led by Senator McCarthy, Joe McCarthy. And his fear was communists could be lurking anywhere, using their positions as school teachers, college professors, labor organizers, artists, or journalists to aid the program and propaganda of world communist indoctrination and domination. And when I read this to the crowd, you get all these grunts and hums and because they're like, that sounds really familiar. That's exactly what we're enduring today.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, this was back then. History repeats itself, right? What is, what was, will be again in Ecclesiastes, right? There's nothing new under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So I started realizing history is definitely repeating itself. And if you take from the 1950s till today, roughly according to the Bible, is one generation is 80 years.
Yeah.
So almost an entire generation started going away, is going by, and now this is starting to happen again. Only this time, more people are very much ignorant to the laws and are completely uneducated and don't want to bother themselves with politics.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those are the two most hardened subjects that everybody doesn't like to talk about is religion and politics.
Let me put in two things here really quick, because we're going to have to take this probably to the second hour because we got two short segments coming up. But let me just play this, because everything you're talking about now, it's just funny because we're living in a world that's so clearly being taken over by communists. So to look at this was the belly of it right here, where they were setting up, prepping us for now. But meanwhile, everything's been rewritten and it's been made into this socialist, godlike, let's just give everything we have and be merry. It's just very contradicting, obviously. But I just want to play all this to lead up to this, one of my favorite quotes from JFK, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I've got 3 of them on here because I used to love to play them, but I'm just going to play it now.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match.
All right, so on the heels of that, we know what happened to JFK.
Yes.
They took his life.
Yeah.
We've had reporters on a hot mic joking about about Trump taking an assassin's bullet, and I feel like it's almost conditioning just to see how ready people are to laugh at something like that or to applaud something like that. I feel like if Trump was really a threat to the ruling elite, he would have already been taken out.
Yes.
They've shown how easily they can do it, even in this kind of world. But let me just ask you this, and then we'll get back on track. We got plenty of time. When you first started going down this rabbit hole, I remember talking to you, and my mind sometimes, I'm just I feel my brain overheating listening to you share this stuff. And you were talking about you even went to a family member who has been pretty up there in politics, and she, or he, I don't want to say whatever, gave you advice are you sure you want to mess with this beehive? That was the summation of it, warning you not to go there.
Yeah.
Because he or she understands what you're talking about and the ramifications and the people that it may ruffle feathers of if you continue down that path.
Yes.
We're coming up on our break. I'll let you collect your thoughts. We'll talk about that when we come back.
For sure.
We're talking to Daniel Mercuri, author of Lucifer, the Lucifer Zenith, running for California governor 2026, just exposing all sorts of evil, talking about things that we should know. I know myself, I haven't actually read the California Constitution. I've got my U.S. Constitution, and I see how those rights are being attacked every possible day, so I can only imagine what this state is trying to do. But we're seeing it right here. We're getting an up-close and personal look through Daniel's slideshow. So if you got us on Rumble or Truth or YouTube, make sure you check this out so you can follow along. Either way, stick around. We'll be right back on Truth Radio, truth-radio.com. All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com with Daniel Mercuri. Before we went into the break, Daniel, I brought up just like the kind of almost the warning piece of advice you got from a family member who, when you shared all of this info you're uncovering about these oaths and about this ambiguity in the law that's within, that our state constituents, our elected officials sign before going in the office, and all the wiggle room they have for this moral compromise. She saw where you were going, and tell us about that, man.
Well, it was my aunt. I love my aunt. She's amazing, highly intelligent. She would be considered on my father's side. They're all Italians, Sicilians. She would be considered, the matriarch of the family. We highly respect her. A lot of times when she speaks, we listen. And she was an attorney for a great number of years. And I wanted her take, and I wanted to present the information to her to sort of get a collective thought, because I was going to be asking a number of other attorneys in the state of California, pretty high profile, and I just wanted to get their take. And it was surprising to me that there was no argument against necessarily my information, what I'm presenting right now. It was the kind of damage that it could cause, or it was more or less, could it spout, or spark an uproar, or some sort of a movement and stuff. And I thought, well, of course. And I said, but they said, all of them said, including my aunt, but you're running for a political position. Is this something that you're prepared for a potential backlash, because they could all see the type of backlash with it. And I thought, well, what does that have to do with justice? Right. A lot of people struggle with trying to, I guess, pine for votes to get into office and sort of dismiss the idea of what it means to present truth. Not that they weren't, not that my aunt wasn't. It was more of a concern. But I thought how peculiar that was, rather than necessarily commenting on, the data, which they did, but it was more or less it was more emphasized about the concern of me in the position that I'm going in. And that, I thought, then I'm going down the right path.
Right.
And that's really what the 5 other lawyers that I spoke to, who are currently still in position right now. They're still all attorneys. They're still active. They're still bar holders. And even they, when I presented it, they were like, I can see why people think you went to law school. And I was like, yeah, I don't go to law school. I just want the truth. That's all I want. And that forces you to have to go down the pathway of, well, what do the courts think? What would the legislative body do? What about the executors? And it forces you to have to understand all 3 branches, which means you got to understand the Constitution and where our forefathers were coming from. So when I did that, then I knew there's something here, and we need to keep going down this path.
Well, let me ask you, we probably don't have time to answer it in this segment, but you've talked to 5 high prominent lawyers, not counting your aunt. Was there any talk of, I don't know, lawsuits, going to the media, trying to get stuff out there to make people aware? like going anywhere else than writing a book or the presentation, doing it yourself?
No, the biggest pushback was, if this were to go to the court, it could cost a lot of money. And I said, not if we try to enter this and get it into an Article 3 court. If that was the case, there's a significant difference, right? But it wasn't about that. It was more about why are they getting away with it and where the core pervasiveness lies. And then what can we, the people, do about it? And that seemed to be a concern because they're like, well, you might, you could do some overturning, you could cause some damage that, people aren't going to like.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they continue not liking what you're doing and exposing the evil deeds of the wicked powers in high places. Stick around. We got a whole nother hour here on the JD Report. Truth Radio with Daniel Mercuri. We'll get back into his presentation, finishing up the O's, and a whole lot more, which is just a taste of what you'll get from the Lucifer Zenith. So stick around. We'll be right back.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com, here for one more hour with Daniel Mercuri, running for California Governor 2026, Daniel4calgovernor.com, author of The Lucifer Zenith, the book we're talking about. It's wild that it's a book. I've seen this thing, the whole process of, you see books come out all the time. And let me go to a two-shot here. You see books come out all the time, and you don't know the authors, but to see the journey you've been on, like just from your initial run for local seat into California governor and everything that's come about, to see it come into book form, and I've only read excerpts, including the introduction, but it's just something like, if I didn't know you, I'd be like, I got to get this guy on. I got to talk to this guy, because it's like this is the type of stuff that people who understand the way the world works, like they crave, but it's stuff that I've never heard anywhere else. So it's amazing how God does. He reveals certain things to certain people, and knowing that, who he's entrusting with that truth and what to do with it. And he's got humble and warrior servants. And that's certainly what you are. I was going to read some stuff from here, but
yeah, please.
You want to get back into That's what I was thinking. You were going to take a little bit longer.
Oh,
But actually, no. I mean, I was going to read the ending when you talk about a lot of people, and I've heard this. People don't want to get political. We've been so conditioned. No religion, no politics. The two things you need to be aware of: the deception in the politics and the deception in religion. But the freedom in a relationship with Jesus Christ, which the mask of religion clouds the truth of that to so many people, sadly.
yeah.
But many have said to you, Daniel, I just can't get political. Well, then you have to acknowledge that you are part of the problem. People don't want to admit they're part of the problem. Ignorance is bliss, but it's also the reason that we're in the state that we're in. And do you like the price of gas that you're paying today? That's political. Do you like the educational system in California? At the writing of this book, California is ranked 44th in the nation. That's political. Did you like it when the scammers told you during the Wuhan virus COVID-19 lockdowns that you couldn't go to church? That's political. How about when Governor Gavin Newsom told Californians that they could go back to church, but they couldn't sing? That was political. Or you had to wear a mask. How about the utility companies in California now charging people for electricity based off of income? That's political. Everything is political. Your paycheck, property tax, food, and the road management are political. It's all political. And that's just a tiny little list you got there, but it really is.
Yeah.
As long as they can politicize everything, they can control everything.
Yes, that's exactly it.
So I guess let's get back into this, because it's so loaded. I almost didn't want to hijack it with the JFK, but I feel like anytime I can bring up JFK, especially when he's like accentuating everything you're talking about,
yes,
maybe it resonates with people, maybe an older generation, but
well, it does. It ties into this because of the Red Scare. But here's the thing, though, is that they subvert the language in legislation. And when they do that, they are trying to do their best to legitimize their betrayal. In order for them to legitimize it, they have to change the language to change perception. If they can't change the language, then they try to operate wherever it's not said. And that's also in the book. And where is it that they operate wherever it's not said? And wherever that is, that's where they're going to try to subvert the rights of the people. And they have to legitimize it. But how do they do it? Well, this oath that I'm going to show you is how they do it, is one of the stepping processes in order for them to do that.
It is amazing. So we'll get back into the oaths when we come back. They try to make everything seem so black and white while they are swimming in a sea of gray, because that's where the truth is. It's in the gray. But it's amazing how many people fall for the far right, the far left ideologies that are just part of the plan to keep us confused and ultimately divided. Stick around. We're talking to Daniel Mercuri, Daniel for CalGovernor.com, author of the Lucifer Zenith. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com, alongside Daniel Mercuri, author of Lucifer Zenith. We're going to get back into these slideshows where he's talking about the oath of office, the ambiguity, and how those in power love to use words to deceive, confuse, confound the masses while their moral compromise goes unchecked. So here we go. We're on slide 17. Take us through it, Daniel.
So as I told you earlier, we got a bunch of oaths throughout the state, sheriffs, judges, legislators. And I noticed when I was running for office, too, I thought, why is this oath so small compared to the California State Constitution? What's written in there? I don't understand this. Everybody's signing a defunct oath of office. So it took a while, and one of my team members was able to get Gavin Newsom's oath. We couldn't get it. And he kept pushing buttons, and and a team member of mine, God bless, the efforts, and he got a phone call, and they were like, check your email. Well, there it is.
Oh, wow.
So now we're looking at Gavin Newsom's oath of office. It's missing the other two, the second paragraph. Well, why is that? So I thought to myself, something's not right here. Let me go back in time and find out when they actually amended the oath back in 1950, who would have been the first governor. So that took a while for me to get it. I had to go through the archives. I had to keep making phone calls. They don't like giving up this information. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that it was Goodwin Knight. He signed the new amended oath. And he writes in there, because there's a second section in there that says, if there is no affiliation, write no exceptions, that you are not a part of any group, organization, political or otherwise, engaging in an otherwise unlawful means of, trying to overthrow the government or the California state constitution. And he writes in no exceptions. The last one was Ronald Reagan. But Ronald Reagan's second oath, when he is second term, he signed the first defunct oath of office, which is only the top paragraph. Now, I say defunct. The state won't call it defunct because of, if you go to the next slide, the reason why they don't submit it is because of the fact that there was a trial jury in 1967, Vogel versus Los Angeles. And it was not easy to find this. It literally came into my lap. I felt like it was the Holy Spirit just went bam, because this is buried.
Wow.
And it was a trial jury that invalidated the second oath, the second paragraph to the oath, because it didn't apply to loyalty employees. Who's a loyalty employee? Anybody that works in like your legislator's office, the mayor's office, the sheriff's office, but they're just administrators. They're required to take the oath. But it wasn't fair to them because they're not elected officials. Elected officials sign a contract, which is the oath. These loyalty employees are being told that they have to give up certain rights, but that wasn't fair because they're not elected officials. They're just employees. So he sued them, and he said, I got fired for being part of a communist group. Well, in America, if you want to be a part of a communist group or, music group or, whatever, you have that right. And so long as you're not doing anything violent, you can be a part of any group that you want. And he got fired for that. He was an accountant, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, the trial jury said, it doesn't apply. We're invalidating the second paragraph for loyalty employees. Great. What ended up happening was the state applied that to everybody in the state of California, including elected officials. That was illegal. And then they never amended the oath. And the reason why they didn't amend it was because it only applied to loyalty employees. So what did we miss? And everybody thought, well, it's not a big deal. It was only to loyalty employees. So then everybody from Ronald Reagan's second term all the way to, if you go to the next slide, 2002, everybody was illegally signing the a defunct oath of office. And another case came out, and that was Jessen versus Davis, Gray Davis. They were running for office. Gray Davis, as most of us know, was recalled, and it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, Governor Schwarzenegger, that took his position. Well, Jessen, during campaigning, was the only one who noticed that he was only administered the first paragraph. And he thought, well, where's the second according to the California state constitution? So he signed his own proper oath, gave it to his county clerk, and he technically was the only one who had the proper paperwork done, which means everybody else should have been disqualified. So he sued Davis because he won the election, and he said, no, I signed the proper paperwork. You failed to do it, because if you do, when you run for office, if you fail even a section, you're disqualified. So he was correct. He technically should have been our governor. So what ended up happening was the court here, the Superior Court, actually agreed with him.
Wow.
And they said, you're right. The previous court case does only apply to loyalty employees. That means anything that was enacted, anything that was ruled upon or executed is null and void from 1968 to 2002. But the judge didn't take it to trial. Instead, they threatened Jessen by saying, then, they were going to fine him if he was found to be wrong and he was ruled against everything. He was going to have to pay for it all. And so the judge then went back and found a court case in Oklahoma and said, well, this was a similar situation, so we're gonna institute what they call stare decisis, which means to stand by things decided. So they applied it and said, the judge said, we're gonna go ahead and apply it to all officials, not just loyalty employees. So they skirted around the whole issue. Gray Davis became the governor, and then they, for a second time, failed to amend the oath.
Wow.
So they didn't do it the first trial. They didn't do it the second trial. So what they did was, if you go to the next section, they codified paragraph 1 and 2. Well, that's illegal. You can't take a law. A law is what's in, remember I said the Constitution, the state constitution is the highest authority of the state. It has to be it has to harmonize with the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. Well, the codes that they came out with that would subjugate our representatives to prison are sections 1368, 69, 3108, and 09. And its summary that says, after having taken and subscribed the oath, any material matter to later found to be false, engaging in it otherwise, other unlawful means, is guilty of perjury and guilty of felony, punishable by imprisonment in the state prison for 2, 3, or 4 years. But here's the problem with those. Those codes only have prosecutorial effect on the second paragraph, of which the state no longer administers.
Wow.
So this is where lawyers that I showed this to, they were like, well, do you really want to bring that up? And I thought to myself, why don't I want to bring this up?
Right.
And they were like, because it applies to judges. It applies to your governor. It applies to everybody that swears the oath. It applies to all of them, which means that anything and everything that they have done, right, they're able to get away with it if it's illegal. And how do I know this, right? If you go to the next slide, they are engaging in what we call a contract. So Article 1, Section 10 is, in summary, no state shall enter into any law impairing the obligation of a contract, meaning the right to a contract is not limited. It means it can be completely egregious, unconstitutional. If you and I were to create an agreement and there was a problem and we took it to court and it was completely egregious to the Constitution, judge is going to take the Constitution and throw it out. Why? Doesn't apply, because there can be no law to prevent its fulfillment. So they're engaging in exploitation of the contract that they're signing, which is only the top paragraph of the oath of office and not the 2, and that's a legal binding contract since they did it. And what the problem with that is that it was never again amended. Our legislatures have to amend the oath. So now we have codes codified. They took a law, they codified it. It's out of sync. That means they're showing paragraph 1 and 2 in the state constitution. You and I are thinking that's the correct oath. The code shows otherwise. The only thing that has authority is the top paragraph, which is just good fidelity. There's no binding anything in it. And it's the second paragraph that is under state codes that could allow for imprisonment. But they don't administer it anymore.
Right.
So now so why did they fail to do that for the last 50 years if you go to the next slide? Trial jury invalidated the paragraph only to loyalty employees. Second judge ruled in favor of applying it to all elected officials. Why did he do that? Because he would have had to have changed his own oath. He wasn't going to do that. Why? Because then everything ruled from all the way back then, from the 1960s till now, would have been null and void. Anybody ever imprisoned under a particular code would have been released. Anything that was operating under the color of law would have been removed and stricken from the books, and anything been built or been ruled upon or created or anything like that would have been stripped, had been taken down. They didn't want to do that. So the judge ruled on it rather than taking it to a trial jury, because when a trial jury rules on it, it's final. The people are the fourth branch of government. So now, why did they do that? Here's one of the biggest reasons in the next paragraph. The word discharge under Black's Law Dictionary, the latest edition, is defined to cancel or unloose the obligation of a contract to make an agreement or contract null and inoperative. So what's happening is your representatives are swearing an oath with the word discharge in it, which means they can engage in egregious behavior with absolute impunity. They will never be investigated.
Let me ask you something. How many times did you have to read through this stuff for it to really sink in? Or did it just was it all just obvious? Because I'm like, I heard you say this stuff and now I'm seeing it. And now you've got it brilliantly presented. And it still was it's like, wow. I mean, it's heavy, and it's a lot of information. And it's like, how has no one ever brought this up? When you realize how corrupt the world is, you realize why or how, but still, it's like,
for me, I honestly believe it was the Holy Spirit. I believe a lot of this information, I kid you not, I had searched online, I'd made phone calls, I was looking at law books, buying law books, court cases, digging up in, the archives and stuff. And I had gone through similar paths over and over and over again. And then just one day I would just type in the same phrase and boom, there was that information. And I thought to myself, but this is like, I would keep track of my phrasing so that I could do word searches a little bit better, get faster results, really narrow down what I'm looking for. And none of this stuff ever popped up until now. And I thought to myself, that's because everything is in God's timing, not mine.
Right.
And why do I understand it? It's because I think I've been so immersed into this because I want the truth. When you're hungry for truth, you feel the pressure and the weight of the information, but you recognize it and you say, now that makes sense. What do you do with it? And that's what I'm trying to educate people on is this is why they don't change it. And now what's one of the biggest reasons why? And that's what kind of led me down to this next path. So if you go to the next slide real quick, another reason why they don't want to amend this oath is because it would rouse their constituents, because the four methods that are in our state constitution all require the electorate. Well, who's the electorate? You and me, the people, meaning our representatives. If they want to change that oath, they have to do it by, there's only 4 ways to do it in the state of California. 3 technically that they do, 1 that we do, which is by affirmative action, right? That all involves the people. They don't want to involve the people. Why? Go to the next one. Here's why they don't want to do it. The corrupt in office choose to ignore amending the oath because it would require involving their constituents to necessitate an unparalleled, fixed oath, free from invalidation, and ensure accountability by imprisonment should representatives ever engage in an other unlawful mean that would subvert the right of the people. So if they drafted egregious legislation, they just threw themselves in jail. That is what we consider an other unlawful mean. That's called Fabianism. It's done through gradualism. Gradualism is basically done by engaging with your representatives with some sort of emolument, which is illegal. We now call that lobbying. And that's why they don't want to do it.
We're talking about California here and California's state law and constitution, but, I just think of the whole circus when Trump was talking about putting Hillary behind bars. And it's just like, it's all just a Roman circus. Just people want to see, when people realize some of the crimes of the Clinton family, even now with Bill's association with Epstein and the so-called revealing of the list, there's nothing going to come of that. There'll never be any justice in this world. We know when Jesus comes back, there will be justice. But, well, let's save this for the other side of this break. I'm going to show again the book. Everything he's talking about right now, you can find in the book, Lucifer Zenith, Corrupting Nature's God Through Government Deception. It'll be out at the very least by the end of next month. This month. By the end of January 2024, you can find it everywhere in February 2024. I'm assuming Amazon.
Yeah. That's where we're going right now.
All right. Lucifer Zenith, Corrupting Nature's God Through Government Deception. Yeah. Stick around. We got a lot more to talk about here with Daniel Mercuri. Get some water, get a coffee, sit back. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com. If you missed anything, again, go to truth-radio.com. We have all the podcasts up. You can listen to it on SoundCloud, Spotify, Pandora, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, anywhere you get your podcasts except Apple. we're not taking a bite out of that pie. But we're talking to Daniel Mercuri, California governor, candidate for 2026, author of Lucifer Zenith, and talking to us now, going through what was a presentation that he would give to many willing ears and many audiences, and offending a lot of people. His tagline, "I'm here to offend you." You know, I used to be like, should you? But it's like the truth really does offend. We're such a sensitive, fragile nation. The egos are so just easily provoked, and we're so highly run on emotion, fueled by it, and being so manipulated by the media and all of these platforms that push an antichrist ideology. But here we are talking to Daniel, who has written a book that is the compilation of years of experience seeing this corruption, seeing it firsthand, up close and personal, and going beyond what anyone's ever been able to do. I mean, just to uncover. I'm sure this is the kind of thing where when they're doing this, they're like, everybody, the public is so dumb. They think we're all so dumb. They think we're all sheep. They treat us that way. No one will ever uncover this, and no one will ever have the balls to do it if they start to peek a little bit. They'll just close that mat really quick. But here you are doing it and putting it in book form. You know, I have read some other books that just like give major bloodlines, talking about like Illuminati, Rothschild families, and they expose things, and you never know really what to take, because a lot of this stuff's documented, but a lot of it's like from what they've probably were born into, like distant family members. Yeah. But you were actually going through and providing, you know, receipts. Like begrudgingly, the state has had to offer up stuff, and you know, we got the Freedom of Information Act, but it can take months, if not longer, to get some of that stuff. But you're going through these painstaking measures to get this information, put it in an easy to read format. So I don't know. I still want to continue to applaud that as we come up here. I know we still got some slides to get through. And
that's really it for the slides. I mean, the rest of it was more about, you know, what can the people do about this now? You know, what should we do? And I encourage everybody to, you know, locally press the issue about changing the oath. And you can do that through affirmative action. What that basically means is go to your county clerk or your city clerk and get a measure on the local ballot locally, right? If you try to do this at the state level, you're going to involve if not all of your corrupt legislators who are going to do everything they can to blockade it. But if you start pushing it at the local level, it will gain further traction throughout the rest of the counties. Then it'll be harder to stop, because now all the constituents want accountability. And the way to do that is through the oath of office, and probably one of the best ways, because of the fact that it's nonviolent. I always tell people, and in the book, I describe, you know, the different types of wars that we're in. But the one war that we haven't engaged in is an arsenal war. And I interview a couple of veterans in my book, kind of get their quick takes on, you know, their perspective. But, you know, it's not a good one. And I tell people, you know, if you've never been to war, then involve yourself and get this oath changed so that we can hold them accountable to prison. Otherwise, what's the point? Because no other candidate really wants to define accountability. They always say, I'm here to fight for you. Well, what does that mean? Right? I'm going to fight for more transparency. Well, how are you going to do that? And they don't actually outline it. You know, what specifically, you know, how do you interpret accountability? I define it as imprisonment, because without it, then there's really no measure that would stop them, except for everybody says the same thing. We'll just wait till the next election. So then you're allowed to continue to engage in egregious behavior, so much so that, you know, they might just keep the door open for themselves and block out everybody else, and they never get removed. That's why we have career politicians. They are the worst. That, you know, everybody says, you know, we've got systemic racism in this country, but I always tell people we have systemic career politicians who like to pour salt on old wounds, keeping the people divided.
Yeah,
that's what they do.
This was a really quick one. I did have a question I wanted to put in there about, and I've asked you this personally before. I'll ask it. I'll tease it right here. I'm 100% behind you on all this, and sometimes I feel like a pessimist, and I know I shouldn't be. We put our hope in the Lord. But I want to ask you the question, all this stuff you're fighting for, you want these people in jail, you want people to step up and get these oaths removed. Do you think that's possible? Do you think that we can really see that type of justice in our lifetime here and get righteous people in office and get these oaths removed. Think about that. We'll talk about it on the other side of the break. Talking to Daniel Mercuri, author of Lucifer Zenith. We got 2 more segments here on Truth Radio. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. I'm Jeremy Dayton, crntalk.com, truth-radio.com, still with Daniel Mercuri, DanielForCalGovernor.com, author of Lucifer Zenith, breaking down his book, everything he's uncovered, corruption in California politics, and really government politics all around. It's worldwide. It's a global thing. We need to be aware. But before we went to break, I asked him, as we're trying to get accountability for our public oath takers once they're elected in the office, hiding behind these clauses that have been deleted or amended with ambiguous wording. I asked Daniel, do you think you can actually see if people get involved? Do you think there could be a time when we see justice and these people are jailed and are held to account for their intentional ambiguity and confusion and deceit of the American people?
The short answer would be yes, I do think so. What the trigger factor is, I hate to say it, but I think it's going to take something obscenely profound that is negatively going to affect everybody. People don't seem to be so, enthralled when something positive happens. They're happy, it makes them feel good, but to get them really, light a firecracker under them, it's almost like something horrifically has to go wrong. If it doesn't touch their doorstep, well, then there's really no reason for them to disrupt and rock their current life's boat. They don't want to engage in those kinds of behaviors because of backlash. They're worrying about whether or not, they're going to lose their job, or if their community is going to, shun them, and, are they going to receive threats? And maybe they have a family and they're worrying about, somebody targeting them. I've been targeted. My family has been targeted. We've had numerous threats. I've had goon squads, pounding on my car's doors, following me. I've had people come up to me, surround me, know what your kids look like, your family looks like, we know you're scared. I've had it all. And, it's one of those things where you can't live in fear. Mm-hmm. You really can't. And so the people have to ask themselves, how bad do you want it? Are you willing to disrupt your decadence? Because if you're not, then don't complain. If someone's sitting here telling you this is a way that we can do it before we have to engage in the Second Amendment, and that basically means picking up arms and engaging in abolishment, which is per the Declaration of Independence. We have the right to abolish our government, and that doesn't mean the Constitution. It means our current body of elected officials who have become tyrannical. Mm-hmm. We can engage in abolishment. We don't need our local authorities' permission. We don't need our militias. We can form new ones. We can form new law enforcement. So we can form new governments and abolish this one and stop giving them the authority. We have every right to do that. But until we unify, that won't happen. Mm-hmm. Until there is a collective uproar that forces us to have that movement, then no, it won't happen.
Yeah.
Can it? Well, for sure.
It's what Christ tells us, what he warns us to follow him, to count the cost.
Yeah.
It's the same thing when, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And when you're following the truth, there's a cost to that, because this world is all about covering up the truth and rewriting the truth. And I got to bring up, because I don't even think I had heard about some of that stuff, getting your doors pounded on. I know I'd heard of some threats, but never really in detail. I know you've had a lot of support from your wife, and you got a family that's had a lot of its own trials outside of this political arena that just has made everything a trial and a really test of faith. Has there ever been any times with these threats when your wife had you reconsidering? And I know you've you considered backing out. You erased your Instagram, and then you had some ghost. I remember there was somebody trying to grab all your stuff and reposting it. He's like, I'm not letting you die on Instagram. But like, take us through some of that, because I think that's the human element when you start getting those types of threats.
Yeah, really... I mean, my wife and I, we've discussed numerous times, how far, are we willing to go? Because it's not just me, it's my family. My family endures everything that I endure. We are a family unit. When we take my daughter in to get her treatment, we move as a family unit. And so much so, even the doctors are like, wow, you guys are all together. Yes, we're here to support my daughter. Yes, we are here. Big brother's here, little sister's here. We are here to support our daughter as a family unit. It's so strange that they think that. And so it is a collective meeting with my family and my extended family, my brothers, my sisters. My sister is my campaign manager and treasurer. And, we have a team of people that are in other cities that are helping me out as well. It affects them as well, right? Danger lurks everywhere. There's always somebody trying to subvert you. There's always somebody trying to, undermine your efforts. And of course there's, I was shocked during the recall after I did the debate. The GOP was upset that I did that. Members up north, called me and they thought it was a great idea, but they told me, you don't do that. We do that. And I think it was about a week or two later, I had 3 people who pulled up in looked like a government vehicle, like a black SUV, and they had suits and ties. It wasn't like some thugs with hats on that didn't like me. They walked up to me. I had, my old junky blue Suburban, steel old car doors, 98, and they came in and they whacked my window with one of their batons, and they were like, hey, and I looked over and I was about to get out, but I realized, it wasn't just me, there's 3 of them, and I don't want to get out because of the fact that there's 3, and of course, they could pressure the door to stay closed, but my engine was on, so I could have taken off, and they were like, we know you, we know exactly who you are, you need to stop what you're doing. We know your family. We know your routine. Stop. And then they whacked the car again, and one of them, put his baton back in there, got in the car, and they left.
Wow.
And I wasn't scared. I was pissed.
Yeah.
I was so angry. And I told my wife, and then, I told my sister and, my other co-campaign manager at the time, Justin. And so, again, it's just one of those things. And I've had a few other people when I've gone to, some of the larger speaking groups, when there's like a crowd of 300 or 500, there's always somebody that comes up to your table and will, slip you a piece of paper in a card that says you're in danger, and then they walk away, right? And you're like, okay. But that happens all the time, right? I've had people call my campaign line and scream at me and say, we're going to pull up to your house, we're going to burn it all down, or even I've had some phone calls where people have invited me to come to their home for a fight, and it just the list goes on and on. And this is what has happened over the number of years. Listen, I served 2 tours, 3 ops. I grew up on the streets. I grew up poor. You're not going to scare me or my family. I trained my family how to fight. I trained my family. We do all kinds of things to ensure safety at all costs. It's just one of those things where, I also understand the castle law and what I can and cannot do. But, if you're in this.
The what law?
It's called the castle law.
The home invasion?
Like what we can do and how you can defend yourself and how to create different barriers and stuff that are lawful. So if somebody steps across your threshold that you have marked, well, I'm not going to sit here and ask you who you are, who you crossed my threshold. I'm just going to shoot you. Because I have every right to. I have a family. I don't have time to be like, excuse me, sir, why did you hop my fence? No, I'm going to shoot you first. And then my signs say, trespassers will be shot, survivors will be shot again. I'm former military. I have no problems. I will sleep like a baby at night. I have pulled the trigger before in the military. I don't have any problems. Don't mess with my home. Does that mean I can take on an army? No. It just means that I have a willingness to stand up in all of this adversity. And so does my family. And so we have made a pact. We have made plans and strategies, and we've come up with all kinds of things, and that'll stay with me, but you have to be prepared for this stuff. I rattled the right cages and the wrong cages, so much so that I've been X'd out of multiple debates, forums, all the way stemming up north. This is why, even though I went to those locations, a lot of people were unaware. They heard of me, but they were like, but I never saw him, or he wasn't invited. Why wasn't he? They didn't know that members of the GOP were Xing me out.
Wow.
They had no clue that the CRA tried to do the same thing. I actually have it on video where, the CRA gave me a standing ovation in SoCal, and it was like 280 delegates, and they weren't going to let me talk. But one of the groups who invited me said, no, we told Daniel to come. We asked him to come and speak. And it was, it was one of the other candidates had just left and just walked out. It was Anthony Tremino. And I spoke right after him. And they were going to all eat lunch. And they said, no, we asked Daniel. And so I got a standing ovation. You see it in video. And I was getting phone calls from members of the tables that were like, we're still deliberating. I said, well, what's the hang up? And they said, they're arguing between you and Larry Elder. They said the rule was if none of the Republican candidates show up, we will not endorse that candidate, right? Even if they like the candidate. Well, Larry, they had a bunch of signs for Larry, but Larry never showed up. So then the rule was, well, we were going to vote for Daniel. And they said, well, no, we want to vote for Larry. And they said, Larry didn't show up. You came up with the rules. So then it was like, well, why did you come up with a rule only to negate it? So they said, fine, it's either Larry or it's a no vote for any candidate.
Wow.
So this is what goes on behind the scenes that people don't see, don't know. And then when you get your list that comes out to you and it says who they want you to vote for, a lot of automatons just go, okay, just highlight all those and you're done. You voted.
Right.
You did your civic duty.
Mm-hmm.
No, your job is to look at every single candidate, read them if they're part of the party. But I tell people, stop focusing on the party. Focus on if they're a constitutionalist, the nature of the character of the candidate, and whether or not, I tell people, if you're asking for leaders, you're asking to be placed under the thumb of the government. They're not your leaders. They are your servants. I'm not here to lead you. I don't want to be your leader. I want to serve you. I want to be your servant. That's the differences between a proper candidate and a candidate who thinks they're better than you.
Amen. Let me, I've got two more JFK and we've got a few minutes left. And I just feel like there's so many secrets, so many lies. Let me play the first minute of this.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
I'll just cut it off there because that's a 2+ minute clip. I encourage anybody. That's from a speech to the I think it was a press thing in 1962 or 1960. I'm blanking on it, but very popular speech. I can't get the black cars out of my head because I've seen and heard many stories, and then I've heard of people who actually did end up dying of a heart attack at the age of 48, or something like that have had incidents like that. So when you know that you're poking on the hornet's nest and you're poking at truth that they don't want people to know about, when you get to a certain level and your platform does get big, that's when they could ramp up those things. And I don't mean to like fear monger, and we don't have anything to fear. Our victory is in death. Death, oh death, where is your sting? But at the same time, obviously, you got a family, and I just, how far do you want to take it? If all of a sudden you're seeing people following you, and they're following you home, and because that's where ultimately when you're on this road, that's where it can and will eventually lead if you do actually erupt that hornet's nest. I mean, are we going to see any justice for the Epstein thing? It's like there's so many levers.
We're never going to. That's why I tell people, everybody asks me, why is anybody going to jail? And that's partly what I answer in the book. And I point out other things in the Constitution that they're using that sort of shadow their engagements against the people, right? It gives them that sort of protective barrier, even though it's egregious and it's illegal. it's enough for people to be confounded. And when that happens, well, then a little bit of doubt makes people think, well, okay, maybe it's possible. It's not okay.
Yeah. And cognitive dissonance sticks in, and they're not willing to believe the worst end, but they're okay with being a little confused if it protects the bubble that they've hibernated in for so long. Let me put up a slide for Lucifer Zenith, because we got one more short segment. But you got to check out this book. Available later this month on Amazon. Lucifer Zenith, Corrupting Nature's God Through Government Deception by Daniel Mercuri. Just a beautiful picture, though, of what this world is, going up in flames through the corrupt leadership of this world. But we got the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and that could happen at any time. The trumpets could go off, and I would not be surprised. But at the same time, we've been spoiled in the West here. We might have to suffer through some things. So stick around here on Truth Radio. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Truth Radio. Final segment. It's been an intense discussion with Daniel Mercuri, always a pleasure. And, we've been pushing the book. He's got his campaign. It's kind of a downtime right now, but when we're talking in the break, and really, as any follower of Christ, we want to plant as many seeds as we can while we're here. That's the beauty of the written word. That's the beauty of God's gift to us in his word. It's been preserved all these years. People can try to tear it down, but when you actually sit and read it with the intent to seek truth, the Holy Spirit will become alive in you, and you will see the truth for what it is. And that only happens with the written word. So many people are so enthralled by audiobooks, and I still listen to a lot of audiobooks, even the Bible. But what this book does is win or lose, and I've spoken to so many politicians, or I won't say politicians, but men of integrity and character who ran for office but didn't win, but spent time in the military, have experience overseas, and just in life that have put in their life's experience into the written word. And there's nothing better that can be passed down than that type of wisdom. So, bravo to you, Daniel. I know right now, as you're getting this book out, it's blood, sweat, and tears have gone into this book, literally. And I guess it's a little bit of a slow time, but I know it's going to start gearing up really quickly, especially after November when you start really looking towards the California elections. Oh, yeah. And you're going to need people. What can people do if they want to help and to help you out?
Best thing that people can do right now is, I always tell people, please go to my website, danielforcalgovernor.com. If you want the book, go to the I'm sorry, I'm blanking here. My merchandise page, and it's right up at the top. There'll be a link available once it comes out. Share it, because if I win or lose, this next coming election, I'm leaving you with something that you can always refer back to, something you can pass down to educate yourself and other people in a nutshell, and how it correlates to biblical prophecy. Whether I'm right or wrong, it will open those doors up to, really helping you see with greater eyes and greater ears to hear and see all the pervasiveness growing. And the second thing is ask, I need door knockers. I need people that are willing to take my flyers and, and just door knock, mail them out, hand them out, go to their groups, and invite me down to come and speak. I'm not interested in, you paying me. Just call me down. I don't care. I've been all over the state. So ask me to come down. I'll put on a symposium. If you want to just talk, I'll sit down and talk. I don't care if it's at a restaurant, somebody's backyard, or if it's, at a church or just some rental room. I have gone and been and sat in front of groups of 5 to, almost 500 people at a time. I want our state back. I want you to have it back. And I want the power to be back into the people's hands. Because without it, we're going to lose this great experiment we call the United States of America.
We really got to get you back talking to Pastor Joe at Blessed Hope right there in your hometown of Simi Valley. You guys heard him. Go to danielforcalgovernor.com. If you can help out, especially if you're in Simi Valley, check in. You can email him there. But more than anything, not more than anything, but definitely included, is check out his book. It'll be out within a few weeks by the end of the month, January 2024, Lucifer Zenith, Corrupting Nature's God Through Government Deception. If you're not afraid of the truth, if you want to see what's going on, why government politicians, career politicians are allowed to continue in office despite their lack of having any morals, this will explain it. And it'll give you a guide work on how to fight back, what you can do, use your voice. So as we part ways, if you missed anything, go to truth-radio.com. Daniel, thank you so much, brother. God bless you.
Again, brother, thank you so much for having me.
It's always a pleasure. God bless you guys. We'll see you next week.